Hi there. It's great to be here. I just want to clear up something very quickly. It says Dr. John Roberts on the slide. I'm not a medical doctor. When I first got my PhD, I was very excited about having a PhD, and I went and booked a plane ticket under Dr. John Roberts, which turned out to be a very bad idea for my ego. I walked up to the desk for the check-in agent, and she said, I just have to ask, are you a real doctor? I was like, yes, I have a piece of paper. I'm very excited about it. There's new emails. Like, no. I think you're misunderstanding me. Are you the useful kind of doctor? At which point I stopped ever booking anything under Dr. John Roberts ever again. My PhD, the reason for the doctor is I have a background in astrophysics. I worked in astrophysics, dark matter, and cosmic rays for 10 years. People in the research team at Verywell and across Dash do have degrees that are a lot closer to this. So Dr. Joata Gobel, who's sitting over there, has a neuroscience PhD who is much more familiar with this. But as a physicist, I have a background in taking big, unstructured, complex data sets and coming up with insights from them. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So just to lay the stage before we start, there's a lot of discussion in the world about data science. And we hear more about it every year. AI, machine learning, data science, deep learning, all these things kind of get conflated and rolled up into a ball together. I just want to make a clean distinction before we start so you know what you're getting into. Think about data being used in two ways. One is to help machines learn. This is an optimization process. If you set a machine loose on large amounts of data, it will optimize better than any human ever will. But you also have to remember that we can have humans learn from data as well. We kind of forget this every now and again when we hear all these stories about deep learning and machine learning and these huge algorithms and black box systems that can optimize the hell out of anything you're doing. This version of data science, where you have a data set and you help humans learn, we've been doing for way longer than it's been called data science. We used to just call it science. And it's been going around for a long time. And this is where you get an insight. You don't just know that something got better, but you should know why. That's the thing you should learn when you do actual detailed human-led research on a data set. Both of these things have huge value inside an organization. It's always easy with the stories we hear in the press and around the advances in machine learning to focus on the machine learning and forget about the innovation and the insight. Machines are very good at optimizing, better than humans ever will be. Humans are currently better than machines at innovating. And it's important to focus on both. So in this talk, we're going to talk about the human learning, about the insights that we have pulled from 20 years of data around people reading about their health questions. We're not going to talk about machine learning, AI, all those things. Over cocktails afterwards, I'm happy to talk about those questions. But for today, it's insights from scientists on data. And here's the laboratory. This is the data set that we have been using to understand the country for over 2 decades. About.com is actually older than Google, interestingly. We built the data center that's in this building and rented it to Google when this small company came to the East Coast and needed a start. This plot here is the traffic to About.com before it became Verywell, before it became .dash. The left-hand side of this is January 1st, 2000. The right-hand side is present day. Left to right is time. The vertical axis here is scale. This is the growth of the internet. As far as I'm aware, this is the only plot like this that exists. When I showed this to my wife, she said, that's amazing, you just derived Mizoni. Congratulations. But the growth you see in the middle there is literally the growth of the internet. Now, that is people realizing that the internet is a thing that they can use, a way they can ask and answer questions. Each of the colored bands here is a vertical: travel, food, health, religion, jobs. The features you can see here is the growth and contraction. So there's a broad dip. I won't go into all of them here, we don't have time, but we can go into it more later. The growth and the dip, there's regular dip you see year in, year out, is summer. The internet gets smaller in the summer. People mostly use the internet at work for everything, not work things. In fact, not even mostly work things. It's kind of amazing to see. The 2 peaks you see are November and January. And the big dip in the middle, that sharp drop, is December. This double bump that comes in year after year after year is a consistent heartbeat of the internet as it grows and shrinks month by month. This data set, particularly for this room, for this audience, you can think about as a large panel, right? Now, if we were a news site like the New York Times or BuzzFeed or the Journal, If you look at your own data, you find the content you wrote that day. So if you look at your data, you discover your editorial successes and your failures. You learn whether you told the world what to care about. As an evergreen publisher where we write about topics that people care about every day and have written about those for a very long time, we don't tell the world what to care about, the world tells us. And that's a fundamental difference in what the data set is and what we learn by looking at it. The content we're sitting on, these tens of thousands of pages of content helping people understand these critical questions they're dealing with in their health and in their lives, have been around for a long time. We've covered the topic for a long time. We update them daily, weekly, monthly to make sure they're always accurate, but we've got a long baseline because we've been looking at people asking and answering these questions for decades. We also know that they've been seen by a vast number of people. This isn't a small sample group. Across Dotdash, we see 1/3 of the country every month. This is a vast, scaled audience that we have. It's a huge panel. And the audience that's coming and solving their questions with our content have no bias because they aren't being asked the question. When you ask somebody, would you prefer healthy food or quick food, they're going to tell you healthy and then they're going to eat a pack of chips. Panels are biased by necessity, either consciously or even unconsciously. But when you're going to the internet to understand how to deal with your diabetes, that's not a conscious or unconscious bias. You just need to know the answer. So it's a hugely unbiased, scaled panel. So that's the data set we're sitting on. That's why it's exciting, and that's why there are a bunch of PhDs working at Dotdash looking at this data, because as far as we're aware, this is the only data set of this scale that is accessible inside a publisher. It doesn't exist anywhere else. Okay, so that's the data set we're working with. Now let's run through a few things that we learned when we started digging into it. I'm a scientist. The first thing you do as a scientist is you go and look for the biggest signal out there. If you can't find the big signal, then you're not doing your job right. In health, what's the big signal? It's the flu trend. If you can't look at a health site's data and find the flu trend, you're probably not doing it right. And we see it. So each year, we see interest in flu evolve totally predictably. In August, it's up 15%. In September, it's up 75%. In October, it's up 240%. You see this consistent growth. We're basically getting to peak flu like right now. I think there was Purell at the door when you came in. Please use it on your way out. It's a good idea. And we see the questions that evolve through this. So we're not just seeing that this interest is evolving. We also see why, right? This critical question of that there is a trend, but what's actually driving it. So in the third quarter, it's preventative. People asking, can I get a flu shot if I have an egg allergy? The answer is no, it's in a live egg solution. It'd be a very, very bad idea. In Q4, people are dealing with it. The top question becomes, how long does the flu last? They're in the middle of it. They didn't get that flu shot. They're now suffering through it. And then when you hit Q1, people are just done with it. How long will it be before I can kiss somebody who has had the flu? We are over this by this point. I joke that this is predictable, but it really, really is. To give you an idea of just how predictable the country is around their health topics, here on the right is a plot of people's interest in their health. A daily plot for the whole country. This is a prediction of the volume of health interest this country has day by day. This isn't for a specific year, this is for any year. And to give you an idea of how important this graph is, this is how we forecast our revenue to the public company that owns us. This has to be very good. It starts in July 1st, and it's got the wonderful x-axis of days since July 1st, because it's research scientist, I couldn't label the graph right. But you can see July 4th at the beginning, it's that sharp dip. Then you hit summer where it's flat. You see a little dip for Labor Day. Then you see this sharp rise as you run into Q4, which is driven actually a lot by flu and other seasonal conditions. And then you see a small dip on Halloween, right? That little 8% drop. People also don't care about their health on Thanksgiving. Right? There's a 15% drop there. And we can all see what's coming next, which is the winter holidays, where we see this huge 35% chasm of interest. Nobody is researching their health conditions over the last 2 weeks of December. And then there's this massive jump on January 1st, where health interest jumps 75% in a single day. This is the entire country going back on that diet, signing up for that gym membership, dealing with those conditions that they let linger over Christmas. There's a huge spike in diabetic interest as you run through that endpoint. People are dealing with the bad behavior they let themselves get away with for the week or 2 weeks before. Actually, inside that Christmas dip, it goes down, but it's not all the way down. And in that last 2 weeks of the holidays, what we do see, interestingly, is a relative increase in the amount of interest from caregivers. People are going home and their parents are telling them about conditions that they hadn't told them about until people came home for the holidays. And so we have a much larger relative fraction of interest during the holidays of people dealing with their parents' illnesses. As we hit the new year, that health interest lasts for 4 months. It basically falls off right after tax day. Take from that what you will. Some things are correlation, some things are causation. I've never looked, but I would guarantee that stress peaks around April 15th. With a stable prediction like this, you can do fun things. You can predict what the year is going to look like. If you're a marketer, you can predict flighting. You know why you should run things at which point in time. But the really valuable thing about having a stable prediction is you can see when it's not true. You can see when things change, because you know what a normal Wednesday looks like. So if it's not a normal Wednesday, you can see why. In September 2001, the world changed. We saw a 300% spike in interest in Islam across the topics that we covered. Not shockingly, that's the conscious reaction of a country trying to understand what just happened. We also saw a 300% spike in weight loss. This is not a conscious interest. This is the subconscious reaction of a country. It's the fight or flight reaction of the US kicking in all at once. These are people who need to get fit, run downstairs, lose weight. And it lasted about 2 weeks. September the 11th was a health event for the entire country. And we see this consistently, time and time again. When the Vegas shootings happened, we actually saw a dip in health interest, but a significant countrywide increase in interest in stress conditions. For the eclipse, we saw a spike in interest in eye health that actually started a day before. People's eyes preemptively hurt the day before the eclipse as they started thinking about it because of the warnings. It's fascinating to watch. And so when you use content to listen, what do you learn about the country? Well, firstly, you learn that the questions that are worth asking and answering aren't how do I make people click on an ad? That's not a useful question. That's ideally the result of actually figuring out your users, what they needed, how to message them properly, and then the result of that is engagement goes up. But you should never start with the last thing. You should actually understand the beginning of it and the things that drive that engagement to build your strategy. So these are actual questions that we've been asked in the health space by clients, by agencies, by partners, by our internal teams. So how do health interests evolve with age? What do millennials care about? You may not be surprised that this was asked by somebody who is not a millennial. Like, wait a minute, we can understand millennials? This is amazing. Are we different people at 3 a.m. or in the middle of the day? How do we identify and reach caregivers? Should we identify and reach caregivers? What are the emerging healthcare interests in 2018 as we go into 2019? So we're going to go through and we're going to answer these 4 right now. Here are what millennials care about in health. Teen health, eating disorders, addictions, schizophrenia, acne, STDs, phobias, contraception, social anxiety disorder. Over 25, it's breastfeeding, pregnancy, miscarriage, preemies, infertility, and multiples. These aren't enormously surprising. It turns out that millennials are people under the age of 35, just like all people under the age of 35. And they need to ask and answer the same questions they always have. The interesting differences here are the ones that aren't age-specific. The stress conditions, the eating disorders. Those things are specific to this generation, a new generation growing up in a world with higher anxiety and higher stress than they have had before. Millennials are just the same as previous generations, just with some stress and anxiety added in. When we look at the day parting, arrow by arrow, we can see what an average day looks like from all health interests, and then we can see which conditions drive a larger or smaller amount of that interest at every single hour of the day. So for example, between 1 and 3, we see a 30% spike in social anxiety disorder, panic disorders, and OCD. These are people waking up in the middle of the night with stress conditions. And it drops down after 3 a.m. It's literally this 1 to 3 a.m. spike. And yes, we did normalize for time zones. PTSD interest spikes 50% at 4 a.m. Slightly different condition, slightly different audience dealing with slightly different challenges, but it's the same mental health issue that is spiking that early in the morning. So we can actually see the night terrors of a whole country. We can't predict which veteran is going to wake up with a PTSD nightmare at 4 a.m., but we can tell you within a band of error exactly how many every night across the country will do so. The people who are waking up at that time in the morning will also have other conditions. They are a different person when they wake up in the middle of the night than when they're dealing with other problems or other challenges in the middle of the day. it becomes very important to reach users where they are with the problem they have right now, because that drastically changes every time they come to a health site. We shouldn't be guessing what people need when they come in. We should let them tell us, listen to them, and give them what they need at that point. Come back to that. We can use all other 3 AM emergencies to help people who are having one right now at that point in time. We see the progression of conditions for sufferers and caregivers. We're going to talk specifically around osteoporosis for this condition, but we see the same pattern consistently through cancers, through rare diseases, through a range of addictions and treatment issues that we cover across the site. But readers 55 plus are 2.5 times more likely to be reading about the warning signs of osteoporosis than people under 35. This should surprise nobody. Osteoporosis really kicks in your 50s. That is the time that people start getting nervous and start looking at whether or not they have it, whether or not it's coming, whether or not they're going to have to deal with it. These are people worrying about their own health. Readers 25 to 34, however, are just as likely to be reading about bone density scan results as readers 45 plus. Now, there aren't any 25 to 34-year-olds who are at scale getting a bone density scan. This is sons and daughters helping their parents interpret their scan results. And then as it gets more serious, and now people know that they have osteoporosis, we see 25 to 34-year-olds being twice as likely to be reading about the side effects of osteoporosis medication than readers just 10 years older than them. So there's this generational gap between the parents in their 50s dealing with these medications and their children who are 20 years younger. Right? That middle gap is not the caregiver for their parents. It's a different age range. And so we see this group by group, condition by condition, area by area. We see the people who are likely sufferers worrying about symptoms and early diagnosis and their own concerns. And then as we get into a case where people have been diagnosed or are treating or are dealing with or understanding the life expectancy of, we see much more of the interest skewing younger or to a group who can possibly be the condition sufferer. So for example, reading about prostate cancer is a better predictor of your age than of your gender. Half of that audience cannot be sufferers, right? And we see this everywhere. And this is important when you're trying to reach people on the internet with messaging. There's definitely an argument when dealing with prostate cancer where you say, only reach guys. I don't want to run any ads against women. And that would be a fundamental mistake because so much of the treatment decisions are being made in that case by the caregiver. We see that consistently, case by case, across the board. I care when I'm reaching you about who you care about, not who you are. And that's a hard thing to infer from a cookie, from a measure, from an audience profile. It's trivially easy to understand when I know the question you're asking right now. If I know you're dealing with treatment options for osteoporosis, I know that you are making treatment decisions about osteoporosis. I literally don't need to know anything else about you. So, what are emerging health interests? It is not a surprise to anyone here that interest in opioid addiction has been going up year in, year out. It's grown 7 times, actually, in the last 10 years. That's the what happened. Now we start to get into the why and the where and for whom. Interest is strongest in the Southeast. This is just a map of people dealing with opioid addiction treatment questions across Verywell. It's strongest in the Southeast. Literally by DMA, you can see the hotspots. Those all line up to places where we have a high occurrence rate. Readers in Tennessee and Alabama are actually 60% more likely than average to be reading about opioid addiction. It's not 0 across the rest of the country. It does spread well beyond where the hotspots are. This is a nationwide crisis. But you can clearly see the geographic bias in where this condition is occurring. And when we looked at this as a profile compared to the profile for people who are dealing with more recreational drugs, it's a totally different audience skew. So the median age for dealing with opioid addiction is 40. 50% of the audience is above, 50% of the audience is above. Parents and children of all ages are dealing with the impacts of opioid addiction. For cocaine, half all that audience is under 31, right? For marijuana, it goes even younger, And so you can see this different family impact for these different conditions, for the different drugs. Okay, so what did we as a company learn from 20 years of health data? Well, first of all, we realized that writing new content every day was a bad idea. If you've got a great piece of content supporting people's questions around osteoporosis, just reinvest in it and make sure it's right today. Don't write 3 more next week. There's a finite number of questions, make sure that they're the right questions. That sounds trivial, but in publishing, digital publishing, particularly over the last 5 years, there's been this like publish everything, publish more, publish even more tomorrow model. We stopped doing that 3 years ago, and we're so relieved that we're on the other side of that. Get out of the way of users, particularly in health. People have a problem, don't think you know what their problem is better than they do. Don't interstitial them, don't stick things in front of them. Make your pages fast. If somebody's having a crisis, the page better load and the content better be there, and then everything else can follow when you're ready. Just get out of their way and help them with the needs they have right now. And answer the question that they have right now. Value real-time signals. If you're coming and asking me about ADHD medication for your son, I'm not going to infer the fact that your father has prostate cancer and serve you an ad for that. I should give you the answer of the thing you're working with right now. You're dealing with a crisis, let's help you in that moment that you have. And we learned you can't be all things to all people. About.com was trying to be all things to all people. It was not a good health site. It had great health content, but it also told you how to roast a chicken. That was a bad idea. So we tore About.com apart. We ripped apart one of the largest, oldest websites on the internet, right down to the studs, tore it down to the basics, built up 6 brand new sites from scratch, and launched Dotdash and Verywell from the cinders and ashes of the site that we broke apart. That was 2 years ago. It worked, thankfully. It's doubled in size over the last 2 years, which is a nice place to be, and wildly outpaced everyone else in the industry. It's nice to be giving this talk this year. 2 years ago, that was a more tense moment. So quick conclusions so you can take things from here to actually use in your own lives. Content allows us to listen to the world. It's not just a way where we push things out and we get nothing back. Content actually allows you to listen to the world. It allows you to find out what questions people ask and what they care about. So when you're putting a message out, whether it's a piece of content or an ad or a piece of creative, take seriously the fact that when you see people engage with it, they're telling you whether they care. And different groups will care in different ways, and you can learn about the world with your creative. Don't optimize at the expense of innovation. If you just let something else run and double your click-through rate, but you don't know why, you didn't learn anything. You can't pick a new strategy based off doubling a KPI. That's irrelevant. You haven't learned anything about why it happened. So don't optimize at the expense of asking why. We're different people every time we go to the internet. Don't believe that we can infer or know better what somebody cares about right now than they know about themselves, especially in health. Value those real-time signals of what somebody needs right now over any inference, any black box, third-party data set of who that person might be. Meet them where they are right now. What we learned was who you care for is actually far more predictive of your needs than who you are right now. The best way of predicting the age of a woman on the internet is the age of the people she cares for. The best way of predicting the age of a guy on the internet is his own age. It's a stereotype, but depressingly it is true. It's true actually in both cases that the age of the person you care for is the best predictor of your own age. It's just for guys, it's generally themselves, which is depressing. When you use your creative to listen, and when you use it to test your ideas and really put pressure on what you believe, you discover insights that aren't just going to transform a creative strategy or a messaging strategy. It actually allows you, like we did, to transform your business. Thank you very much.